Well, when you look at the countries in East Asia, neighbors of China, the origin of the outbreak, you see a common factor. That is, all these nations, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, Hong Kong, they have institutional memory of what an epidemic is. That is, they've gone through it before. The SARS scare in the early 2000s, and in the case of South Korea, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, in 2015, which had a very high fatality rate. Some 30% of those who were infected fell to the disease. It didn't spread, it didn't touch upon many people in South Korea in 2015, but because of the high fatality, it was quite concerning to the South Korean people. So these countries know what to do when there is an epidemic. They know how to seal the border, they know how to do contact tracing, they know how to do mitigation, far better than most countries in Europe and notably the United States. European nations and the United States in particular do not have that institutional memory. The most recent pandemic or serious epidemic for these nations took place 100 years ago. So I would say countries like Italy and Spain and certainly the United States were unprepared and somewhat complacent as the disease was spreading rapidly in China and in the region throughout the latter part of January and February. I would also add that, not necessarily on a laudatory note, that Confucian values have a role to play. I don't subscribe to cultural Confucianism. I would not suggest that Christian nations or Confucian nations can be predetermined to be successful or not successful in diseases mitigation or economic development. But there are certain common features in the Confucian civilization, in the Chinese, the Sinic civilization, that lend themselves to obedience, to coming together for the good of the nation. So in South Korea's case, measures by the government, which probably would not be tolerated in the more advanced liberal democracies, say in Sweden or Finland or the United States or the UK, like the government very aggressively inspecting people's phone records, using GPS on people's phones to track where people are suspected of infection, inspecting their credit card records, using CCTV footage throughout cities to track people down as if the government were tracking down suspected terrorism suspects. That kind of aggressive measure probably would not be condoned in the more liberal democracies of the world. But practically speaking, those measures are helpful in mitigating disease, the spread of the disease. So the fact that Taiwan, the fact that South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, by world standards, are not among the elite tier of advanced liberal democracies, the fact that they are Confucian societies, probably more prone to honoring, listening to government directives, was a positive factor, I would say, in containing the disease.